Chapter 27 American Empire Introduction. In this lecture, you will learn about the beginning of America's Age of Empire, as it came to be called later, the first attempts to extend American political and economic power and cultural influence beyond the continental United States, beyond the fulfilled expectations of manifest destiny, into the heady regions of global power and hegemony, a pinnacle of influence enjoyed historically by only a small club of forceful and sinewy brawlers on the world stage, countries and kingdoms who wore on their purple robes and crowned heads the diadem of omnipotence, and dared all comers to take it from them. The British were the current heavyweight champions, as the Spaniards had been before them. But though in 1900 a day did not dawn which did not still shine on some outpost of British dominion somewhere in the world, still the arc of that sun was lower in the sky every year, and the arc of history appeared to be bending it toward the sunset. The old British lion was tiring, and the young American eagle, invigorated with the strength and idealism of youth, was circling above. But that didn't mean the eagle was ready, or even willing, to descend onto the meat of empire and take it away from the lion. The Americans, obligated as they were by their unique institutions of democracy, were first required to debate the wisdom of such an idea among themselves. Debate they did, and in this lecture you will learn the 11 reasons why the detractors of the idea of a willful extension of American power onto the global stage thought it was a bad idea. Then you will learn the 10 reasons why the supporters of the idea thought it was not just a good idea, but a necessary idea, whose time had come. Well, we know, with the hindsight of over a century since that debate was held, who won that argument. Off the country went into the complex and uncertain world that global potentates play in. The rest of this lecture is devoted to the American attempt to join that club, to export American economic institutions of capitalism and free markets, political institutions of democracy and republican government, and cultural institutions of Christianity and community, wherever American power could be asserted to our benefit. There was one unique feature of this bold experiment which made it different from every former attempt at building a global empire, and that was the nature of what the Americans were building and exporting. The Spaniards, in their day, had exported the economic institutions of mercantilism and slave labor, the political institutions of military power and the divine right of kings, and the cultural institutions of the authoritarian Catholic Church. The British, when their turn came, exported the same things, but gave it all a human face. Now the Americans were coming, they said, as the human face itself, with their own unique institutions which reflected, in theory at least, power of, by, and for the people. Such a bold and idealistic agenda had never been tried in the 4,000-year history of empire-making, which went back to the Assyrians, before the Egyptians. Even the Greeks, who invented democracy, had not dared export it beyond the walls of Athens. Their empire, when it came, was built on force and intimidation, like everybody else's. The Americans, however, had already enjoyed some success at empire building in their own country, if you consider the expansion of the country in the manifest destiny years to be a kind of empire building. They had fought a civil war to keep their polyglot domestic empire together, and consolidated it with the blood and treasure of the nation. So maybe what the Americans wanted to export, which was the first unique feature of their empire-building project, would in fact work on a global scale. But there were also 2 equally compelling reasons that such an experiment would fail. The first reason was that American institutions had only ever worked in America, among Americans. The fact was that the politics, economics, culture, and social structures of people everywhere in the world differed from that of the Americans, and had always differed. Those differences, in fact, accounted for why people came to America. But coming here had been their choice. As empire builders, Americans would be bringing the choice and enforcing it, not merely offering it. The response to this criticism was, of course, that the American system is nothing but choice. The people get to choose everything, from those who govern them, that's Republican democracy, to how much they participate in their own governance, that's civil rights, to what products are available in their marketplace, that's economic capitalism, to what they choose to believe in, that's religious freedom. Who would not love that? The fact that most people have never been offered these choices in thousands of years is even more reason to offer them now. That was what the proponents of American empire were saying, but they forgot an essential fact in this reasoning, which was the other reason why the experiment in American empire might fail, and that was that, even in America, the institutions that the pro-empire apologists were so proud of existed only in theory and on paper, only under glass in the Smithsonian Institution, safely and securely stored there for viewing by school children on field trips. The fact was that by 1900, as you learned in the previous lecture, American economic and political institutions had already been hijacked by the plutocrats. The populist movement had been the last attempt to restore power to the people, and that effort had failed. American institutions and political and economic practice, as defined by the robber barons, is what, in fact, would be exported to the needy and hungry world, whose laborers could, and would, with sufficient organization, raise mountains of food for export, and, with some training, work on assembly lines in industrial factories, producing an endless variety of commercial products for very little cost in labor. If the means to this outcome could be sold to the American people as a crusade to raise these workers' fortunes to new heights of dignity and prosperity, then the moneyed class in America could also make a fortune while offering the American people more material prosperity at cheaper prices and blunting the pesky labor union movement at the same time. This scenario was what was actually going to be exported on a global scale under the guise of American institutions of political democracy and free market enterprise. That said, though, compelling idealistic reasons still remained for doing even that. One of them was a person who came from a most unlikely source, a charismatic politician from the blue-blooded American plutocracy of privilege and old money. This history-making maverick made his way genially up the ladder of American politics like any other well-oiled politician, then became rather shamelessly infatuated with the country's potential for doing good in the world. So motivated, he then hitched his rising star to the most generous and democratic wellsprings of American idealism, as the populists had tried and failed to do before him, and, so sustained, became a one-man hurricane in American politics, sweeping all before him. He was, as his critics later lamented, the only bull in American politics who brought his own china shop with him. He wedded the idea of American exceptionalism to the idea of American empire, and intended to stretch American manifest destiny like a fitted sheet over the entire globe. Americans' ideals would replace the tired arrogance of British class imperialism, the upstart bullying of the rising German military machine, the failed and cruel warlord dominions of Asia, the brutal and barbaric imperialism of the Russian Tsar, the poverty and desperation of the multitudes in South America, so ill-served by their corrupt banana republic masters. Even the primal and prehistoric darkness of Africa would finally see a candle of enlightenment and civilization. All this was possible, said this mesmerizing American political adventurer, and with enough devotion to our basic ideals, it would all be inevitable as well. This lecture is the story of the good, the bad, the ugly, and the sublime in America's first attempt at global empire.